Good. So we are in Daniel, continuing Daniel, and now we get to all the crazy stuff. So if you've been following us in Daniel, it's been a bunch of narratives all until this point, stories, like Daniel in the lion's den and Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego being thrown into the fiery furnace. And all of that has been happening. Those are stories of when Israel was taken and removed, the people were moved to Babylon and scattered throughout the Babylonian Empire. Daniel and his friends were moved to Babylon and served in Nebuchadnezzar's court, then Belshazzar's court, and then Belshazzar died, and then there was the Mede, what's his name? Darius the Mede, right? He comes in and then he's the one who throws him in the lion's den because he's kind of trapped by other leaders. And now all of a sudden you get to chapter 7 and the whole book becomes apocalyptic. So like when you think of apocalypse, what do you think? The end of the world. What else do we think? If I say something's apocalyptic, what do you think? Earth-shattering. In a good way or a bad way? A bad way, right? It's like all the forces of all the world come together for one cataclysmic event that changes everything, right? That's the way we tend to look at it. Like you look at the movie Apocalypse Now, it's like all hell breaks loose, right? That it's all, everything's going horrible, everything's coming to a head. And so apocalyptic literature in ancient times was very much like that. The word apocalypse just means revealing. Just means it's revealed, right? So the book of Revelation is actually in Greek is the word apocalypse. It's revealing. So Revelation it's a revelation. It's revealed. But the word itself doesn't give it its full meaning in the way that it's used by the ancient writers in the ancient Near East. It's all these supernatural forces coming together in one big cataclysmic battle and event, right? And so Daniel starts leaning into these events and very much linked to Revelation. I'm not going to get into Revelation today, really not too much. But I remember when I first started reading the Bible. I became a Christian when I was in college. This is like 1985. And I'm devouring the Bible. I just loved reading it all of a sudden, And that's a far cry from before. Like, so much change. Like, I walked into my room my freshman year. My roommate was the son of an Episcopalian priest, and he was just another college student to me, like my best friend. And I walked in one day, and I asked him what he's reading, and he said the Bible. And all of a sudden, I got nervous and started backing out of the room and left the room so he could read his Bible in peace because I was so uncomfortable. And then I gave my life to Jesus Christ, and I couldn't put it down. I'm reading like the whole book of Genesis in one day, the whole book of Exodus in one day, the whole book of Deuteronomy one day. All of these, I'm just reading through one large book a day and plowing through the Bible. But in the very beginning, when I started reading, I decided, okay, look, gave my life to Jesus. I'm going to find out who Jesus is, and started reading Matthew. Loved it. But then, you get to the end of Matthew, I'm like, what happens next? Where do you go? Where? Acts. So I went to the book of Acts. I'm like, this is awesome. What happens next? Whatever, I went to Revelation. And I got about 8-9 chapters in and said, this is messing me up. Because I was just fully invested in the Bible is all true, and there's all these characters that are worse than anything I'd ever seen in cartoons, and they seem ridiculous, and I'm supposed to believe this is true. I'm struggling with believing. And I don't want to shake my newfound faith in God and the Bible. So I said, I'm going to not read Revelation, at least for a while, right? And I was so clueless. I remember, at this time I was meeting with a friend that I'd reconnected with who had also become a Christian. He had been a Christian longer, and we were this Assembly of God pastor and recording in his basement gospel music. And they made some joke about not till Jesus comes back. I'm like, wait, he's coming back? I had no clue. I knew nothing, right? And that's the whole story of the Bible, is that the Messiah is coming. And most of the things that the Jews were expecting was the second coming, even though they didn't know there was two comings, right? There was the first coming when he's a baby. They killed him, and now he's going to come back, and he's not coming as a baby, right? And so we get some of this in chapter 7 as you're reading this apocalyptic literature. When you get into Daniel chapter 7, you have to understand that you are reading literature that is very different than what we would read now. Okay? It's symbols all over the place. There's just tons of symbols. And if you don't know the meaning of the symbols, it's difficult to know the meaning of the book. And everybody disagrees about what the symbols mean, which makes it all that much more easier. And so as we try and read this, let's pull out the things that we know, that are relatively assured, and the other rest, just keep your eyes open. Because here's the thing about prophecy, and especially like apocalyptic prophecy. But if you think about this, I said this before, so if you're new, this is for you. So understanding prophecy is like trying to figure out the first coming of Jesus when all you have is the Old Testament prophecies. You've got him coming with fire and ready to conquer the world, and you've got him coming as a little baby, and you've got him coming like you've got this vague prophecy in the Psalms that people probably didn't recognize as a psalm. David's writing, you've pierced my hands and feet. You've divided up my garments and cast lots for them. So would they would read Psalm 22 and say, oh, that's about the Messiah. He's going to be crucified on a cross because they're going to pierce his hands and feet, they're going to pierce his side, they're going to strip him of his clothes, and they're going to gamble for them. No, they're just looking at David and like, what are you talking about, right? So now, the disciples are at the cross, hands and feet are pierced, and the soldiers are rolling dice, gambling for his clothes, and they're like, and then Jesus at the top of that says, my God, why have you forsaken me? The beginning of Psalm 22. So now everybody's standing there is going, oh my gosh, it's a prophecy of this moment. Even if they didn't do that at the time, and they would have been a scroll. But the thing is Jesus is pointing them to the event that's written about in Psalm 22. So the prophecies are not so that you can predict the future. Like you can't put all of these things, matter of fact, there are whole cults and everything that get in trouble by doing this because they do their calculations, they figure out the math, they determine when Jesus is coming back, and they're the only ones that have the truth. And Jesus specifically said he didn't even know when he was coming back. Yet, some earthly-minded person can just do mathematics and the scripture and figure it out. That's ludicrous, right? But there's whole denominations and cults that have started this way, using passages in Daniel especially. And so we've got to be careful of that. But what prophecy does is when you look into the future of these things is that when they happen, like reflecting on the cross after it happening, the validation that this is all according to God's plan, which is the theme of the whole book. Remember I said the theme of the book is God is in control. He is sovereign. He makes kings, he tears them down. He makes bad kings and tears them down, right? He makes good kings, he makes bad kings, all for his purposes. He lets the sin of mankind fall all over the place and still accomplish his will, even though they do evil things. So it isn't like God sit there and said, I want you and you and you to crucify my son. I want you soldiers, I want you Pontius Pilate, and I want Judas to betray. I mean, all these things. He knows a lot of that's going to happen, all right? And he's going to use all those sinful ways to still cause his will to be done, right? And that does not mean that the people who did those things are not guilty. They are. It isn't like Judas can say, well, you made me just to do this one thing. No, you had a choice, right? And I will use your choices to still do my will in spite of your choices. And that's the thing is in your own life, right? You have choices, right? God's will is not going to be thwarted because of your choices. He's still got this overarching plan that he's going to make sure happens, and he may use your stupid mistakes and your sin, right? He may use all that. That doesn't mean it's good. It's still bad. So we start chapter 7. That's how we read chapter 7. It's a prophecy about the future so that if during your lifetime you are lucky enough to see the unfolding of these events, lucky, you will recognize them because God has given us the signs to look for. All right? One other thing that I should have mentioned too. Apocalyptic literature, like when you think apocalypse, we thought it's bad, right? But for the Jew, this is actually good. This means that the end and the consummation of all things that happen is not bad, is that God finally takes his rightful place, defends those who loves him, destroys his enemy, and his kingdom will be established, and it will last forever and ever and ever with no end. That's good news, right? But when we think apocalypse, we don't get excited. But that's really what they would have read into this. Is like, yeah, they would be disturbed, but God actually comes to his throne on earth and rules forever. All right, and there's some really fascinating stuff in here. So if you open up your Bible to chapter 7 of Daniel, we'll get started. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon. So he dates when he has this dream, right? He says Daniel had a dream. So Belshazzar, if you remember who he was right before Darius the Mede. He was partying with all the silverware and glasses and plates or whatever from the temple in Jerusalem and worshiping with them the gods of gold and silver. And there was a writing on the wall. This disembodied hand writes on the wall and says, "You're done." And he dies that night. But this is during his reign, probably several years before he died. This probably obviously didn't happen that night, but obviously the first year of his reign is when this was written. So in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream. And visions passed through his mind, and he was lying in bed. He wrote down the substance of his dream. Daniel said, "In my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was the four winds of heaven churning up the great sea. Four great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea." Now, this is interesting. So, like, we're going to look at these beasts, and we're going to think, this is nuts. Stay that aside right now. But looking at the sea, there's again, symbolism. Like, if you get into Revelation, you have two leaders of the evil, the beast and the Antichrist come up. One comes out of the land, and one comes up out of the sea. The symbolism, the land is, you think of the promised land. So it's going to be a human that comes up out of where? He's going to be Jewish, right? And he's going to have a partner in crime who rises up out of the sea. That will be a Gentile. The sea is seen as the peoples of the world that are not Jews. That is all of humanity that wouldn't come up out of the land. But there's something else going on here, and that isn't necessarily. So when you read the New Testament, Old Testament literature, and I remember listening to somebody talk about this, Michael Heiser, is that much of the Old Testament is written to kind of get in the face of the Babylonians and the Canaanites because of their creation stories and who they think God is. They have some semblance, elements of the truth. So, for example, how many flood stories are there around the world in ancient times? Like, I don't know how many, but every ancient civilization has a flood story. Odd, right? If it didn't happen, kind of strange that every single civilization has a story about a flood and one family that survives, right? So they have some elements of history accurately, but the Jews kind of go and put it in their face. This is where you get it wrong. So when you get to Babylonian theology, you have the creator, which they don't name, creates the gods, right? And the first one is Tiamat. And her consort is Ea, just an E and an A, right? And then they have children. And Ea doesn't like his children and wants to destroy them. And Tiamat tries to talk him out of it, but he's still doing it. And the kids are like, whoa, we need to do something about this. So they kill their father, all right? Tiamat now is angry, and her wrath is going on and wants to destroy her children now. And the children find one god who can take her on and destroy her, and that's Moloch. And Moloch is the one that the Babylonians would sacrifice their children to, all right? Somewhat similar in the Canaan gods, but it's a little different story. But here's what's interesting. The word Tiamat in Babylonian is just sea. All right? And in Canaanite theology, you have Baal, right? Baal, oh Baal, save us. That whose consort is Yam, all right, who is a woman, who, when you translate Yam from Canaanite language directly into English, it is sea. So these gods of the pagan kingdoms saw the sea as a god and not a good one. It is from where, when you think of the sea, you got storms, you've got danger, you've got chaos, you've got unpredictability. Everything chaotic and evil comes out of the symbolism that is the sea. All right? And out of that rises these beasts. Now, if you look at the creation story, right, you have in the beginning, God's Spirit hovered over the what? Waters. And the earth was formless and void. Chaos, darkness. And God, our God, speaks into that world and creates order and beauty, creates land and the sun, moon, and stars, and the animals and life, creates life and order and a perfect garden where everything's in order. Completely different than what the Babylonians would tell this story, is that out of the water comes this monstrous being that creates humanity that comes out of the sea, and we're horrible. All right, so now let's go to the beasts. All right, so we're going to continue reading here. Verse 4. The first was like a lion, and it had wings of an eagle. And I watched until its wings were torn off, and it was lifted from the ground so that he stood on 2 feet like a human being, and the mind of a human was given to it. And there before me was a second beast, which looked like a bear. It raised up on one of its sides, and it had 3 ribs in its mouth and between its teeth. And it was told, "Get up and eat your fill of flesh." After that I looked, and there before me was another beast, one that looked like a leopard. And on its back had 4 wings like those of a bird. And the beast had 4 heads, and it was given authority to rule. And after that, in my vision, I looked, and there before me was a 4th beast, terrifying and frightening and very powerful. It had large iron teeth, and it crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. It is different from the former beasts, as it had 10 horns. While I was thinking about the horns, before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them, and 3 of the first of horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like that of a human, and of a human being, and a mouth that spoke boastfully. Now, these beasts that come out of the sea are hideous. Now, if you remember going back to chapter 2 of Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, right? And in his dream, he didn't want to tell anybody what it was. He just wanted his leadership to tell him what the dream meant, what the dream was, so he would know that the translation, the meaning was true. Only Daniel could tell was a dream. And it was this dream of this giant statue with a head of gold and a breast of silver, and then, might get up backwards, maybe it's bronze and then silver, I can't remember. But you have these 4 different bronze, then silver midsection, and legs of iron, and feet of steel, of iron mixed with clay, and it's brittle with 10 toes, right? And that a rock that was carved out of a mountain without hands was hurled at the statue, and it came crumbling down, and it grew into a giant mountain encompassing the entire earth. And Daniel said the translation is, there are 4 kingdoms in this. You are the first kingdom. The head is gold. That is you, great and mighty. But after you will come another kingdom, which is stronger but inferior to yours. It's like the next kingdom. And the next kingdom is that third, and then there will be one of steel or iron that crushes everything, but it's got some brittle feet. And there's like these 10 kingdoms eventually going to come falling apart when this rock hits it. Now, the rock is obviously Jesus Christ, right? Not made of human hands. He's not a descendant of human beings. He's created from a power not with hands, right? And he is hurled at the statue, which is these 4 kingdoms, comes crashing down and grows into a kingdom that establishes the whole earth. The first kingdom is definitely Babylon. We know that because Daniel says, the head represents you and your kingdom. After you comes another one. The other one that came after him is the Persian, or the Medo-Persian Empire. And after that comes the Greek or the Macedonian Empire with Alexander the Great. And then the next one is where everybody starts to really argue. So sometimes what they'll do is they'll say that the head is Babylon, the next one's Medes, the next one's Persian, and the next one's Alexander the Great. There's problems with that interpretation. The other ones, most of the time what they do is they say the head is Babylon, then Medo-Persia, then Greece. All right? So when you look at the animals, you have terrifying animals, right? The third one's interesting because the third one is a leopard with 4 heads and it has wings. Now, a leopard is very fast, right? Alexander the Great took over the ancient world in 12 years and died in his 20s. Very fast. Very, very fast. So here's leopard, very fast. And it has wings, which makes it even faster, but also has 4 heads. And those 4 heads, he had 4 generals. And when he died, he didn't have an heir. So what happened was those generals all split up the entire empire. One took Babylon, another one took the Turkey, Syria area, another one took the Egyptian area, and the last one took the least likely of all of them was Rome. All right, and many times what they think about Rome actually, and this could be true and we don't know. So the 4th kingdom has 10 horns or whatever, and a lot of people will interpret that the small horn, Rome, devoured the other 3, which would be Babylon, Syria, and Egypt. But Rome didn't really extend out to Babylon that much. So it doesn't always, nothing applies really great. So a lot of times people will like to try and figure out what this kingdom is. A lot of times we'll do Rome and then the 10 kingdoms, the 10 toes, and the 10 horns are the 10 kingdoms of Europe, France, Germany, etc. But it's not exactly 10. There's a lot more if you start counting the countries in Europe, right? There's no perfect analysis of what this kingdom is. All we do know is that it's ruthless. It's got iron jaws and claws of bronze that are there to destroy. Every one of the kingdoms are there to destroy. Now, this is what we know about the last kingdom. How supernatural are the first 3? Is Babylon supernatural? Nope. Are they ruthless? Yeah. Is there a whole lot of evil going on? Yeah. Is it terrifying if you're not Babylonian? Yeah. Same thing with Persia. Persia, they just take you over and now you're Persian. There were some good things about the Persian Empire, but strong and able to take over and destroy the kingdoms that were there before. Then you take on Alexander the Great. He had developed new military tactics. It is not supernatural. It isn't like he had dragons of his own, to roast everybody. He didn't have his own wings. It was all human ingenuity that is evil as evil can be. The kingdoms of the world are evil. And so the way the ancients would have looked at these animals is terrifying and threatening, but it's all coming out of the sea, which is the mother of mankind that creates chaos and evil and horror. And so you're supposed to be horrified when you see those things, but you're supposed to see them as human entities, human kingdoms. All right? And they're supposed to be terrifying. Now, the thing is that no matter how great we get, like the worst, just people are horrible. Think about this. Every time we invent something good, someone will use it for bad, right? So AI could be a really great thing. Write all your college papers for you. But it also could pretend to be you, right? And it isn't like the AI has a mind of evil. It's just a tool. There'll be a person behind it, right? Computers start getting... I remember I got my first computer. I'm old enough that when I went through school, I never turned one on. We didn't have students with computers when I was in high school. I went to college, and there were some students that were studying computers. There wasn't very many computer degrees. You couldn't get a computer science degree. You had to get a math degree with emphasis in computer science. All right? I graduated from college, never turned a computer on. Start teaching school, year 1, year 2, year 3, no computer. Move to a new school, thou must get a computer. And I'm terrified. I go, no problem, you get a Mac. And I bought myself Macintosh LC2. I was so proud. Went into debt $2,000 and have never recovered. I had a computer screen that was color. I had 20 megs of hard drive space. Have this awesome computer. My brother's all excited. He comes to visit. He puts in little gaming programs and gives my computer a virus in the first week. Stupid computer. Right? The computer's not evil. It's like some idiot somewhere think it's really cool to mess up my computer. I just went into that $2,000 to get a virus. Right? It does not matter what good mankind comes up with. Mankind will try and find a way to destroy other men with it. That's the world we live in. That's the picture that's painted here. Evil will just keep coming up out of the sea and destroy and kill and wreak havoc on the world in which we are a part of, right? So if we continue reading here, all of a sudden it takes a break and it shows something, a totally different environment, not the sea and the evil that's coming about it. So this is verse 9. As I looked, thrones were set in place, and the Ancient of Days took his seat. His clothing was as white as snow. The hair of the head was white like wool. His throne was flaming with fire, and its wheels were all ablaze. A river was flowing, coming out from him. Thousands upon thousands attended him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him, and the court was seated, and the books were opened. Who is the Ancient of Days? Who? God the Father, right? It's a good guess. We'll continue reading here. Then I continued to watch because of the boastful words of the horn was speaking. So remember those 10 horns, the 11th horn that rises up and starts speaking things against the other 10, or the other 3 boastful things in general. He takes over 3 other ones, right? I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into blazing fire. The other beasts were stripped of their authority but were allowed to live for a period of time. I'm not going to get into that for right now, but that's in Revelation, all right? In my vision at night, I looked, and there before me was one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. Who's that? He approached the Ancient of Days, and he was led into his presence. He was given authority and glory and sovereign power. All nations and all peoples in every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion and will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. That definitely sounds like Jesus, right? Then we go on. I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind disturbed me. I approached one of those standing there and asked the meaning of all of this. Now, we don't know who it is. It's some angelic spiritual being up there somewhere. It doesn't name him. We don't know anything. It's just somebody that's standing there that I would probably be scared to talk to, but he does. So anyway, he told me and gave me the interpretation of these things. The 4 great beasts are four kingdoms that will rise from the earth. But the holy people of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and ever. Then I want to know the meaning of the 4th beast, which was different than the others and most terrifying. With its iron teeth and bronze claws, a beast that crushed and devoured victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up, which 3 of them fell. The horn looked more imposing than the others and had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. I watched, and this horn was waging war against the holy people, defeating them until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the holy people and the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom. He gave me this explanation. The 4th beast is a 4th kingdom that will appear on the earth. It will be different than the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. The 10 horns are 10 kings that will come from this kingdom, and after them another king will arise, different from all the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress the holy people and try to change the set times and the laws. The holy people will be delivered into his hands for a time, times, and half a time. Now, right there's where people start doing math. Now, when in school did you learn how long a time was? Right? Now, a lot of people will try and do this, and there's some really good scholarly work on it, but again, this is stuff we won't know until it happens or after it's already happened. We're not going to be able to figure out a time times and a half a time. We're not. Most people would say this is the 7 years of the tribulation, and this will be the first 3.5 years of the tribulation, a year, 2 years and a half a year, the 7 years tribulation, so it would make sense. And it does make sense. And maybe that's the case. But we don't know. A time, maybe that's a year. Times, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 25 years, 150,000 years. We don't know. It's just a plural of time. Right? A time, times, and then a half time would be a half of whatever the first one is. Those first two, the first one and the last one, if you can figure out what a time is, you can figure out what a half time is. But the one in the middle is just a multiple of the first one. We don't know how many. All right? So it's difficult to figure that out entirely. But there are people, like I said, will start whole cults and whole denominations based on that. I would not run after that kind of stuff. It might fascinate you that you love end time stuff. Be fascinated. Study it to your heart's content. But be careful of taking symbols that we don't know and aren't supposed to know what they mean until later and building a whole theology about it and condemning everybody else who doesn't believe it. All right? Continuing on. Verse 26. But the court will sit, and his power will be taken away and completely destroyed forever. Then the sovereignty, power, and greatness of all the kingdoms under heaven will be handed over to the holy people of the Most High. His kingdom will be an everlasting kingdom, and all rulers will worship and obey him. This is the end of the matter. I, Daniel, was deeply troubled by my thoughts, and my face turned pale, but I kept the matter to myself. Until he wrote it down for us to read, right? So we've got a couple of things here. The fourth beast has these 10 horns. We don't know who they are, but there's another one that rises up that's, what do you know about the last horn? It conquers 3 of them, right? So like if that happens, one of the things we might be able to notice, now that doesn't mean it. So let's say some kingdom rises up, demolishes 3 other major nations. We could go, ooh, maybe. But again, maybe. Because it isn't like the first time some kingdom destroyed 3 other kingdoms. All right? What else do we know about the horn? Yeah, it has eyes of an ant and a mouth. What does it say about the mouth? Very boastful, right? Now here's where we get trapped. I will see that critter coming. We think, this is such a monstrosity. How can we not recognize the Antichrist? He's boastful. He's terrible. He's destructive. He's wreaking havoc. We're all running for our lives, right? He's got to rise to power first. So here's something I want you to look at also. So just keep that in the back of your mind, all right? As we go back to the Ancient of Days, actually, let me see here. Let's go to Matthew chapter 24 first. So Matthew chapter 24 is apocalyptic in Jesus' teaching. So Jesus is standing there before his people. So chapter 24 is all about the end times. And Jesus talking about it. And he refers to Daniel quite a bit. And in 24, the disciples are walking around Jerusalem amazed by the temple. And they're saying, Jesus, look how awesome your temple is, right? He's going, there'll come a time when one stone does not stand upon another. It's going to be destroyed. And they're like, don't say nothing. So they're later, and they go, can you tell us when these things will happen? And guess what he does? He doesn't tell them when. He gives them all the signs of things that will happen. And it's difficult because the temple has been destroyed. It's already fulfilled in a sense. But there could be another temple that does the same thing. All right? And it could be destroyed, and that would be the signs of some of the signs that are coming. But he said this temple will be destroyed. Not one rock will stand upon another. And it's been completely demolished in AD 70 by the Romans. Now, one of the things he starts reading, though, is all of the cataclysmic things that are going to happen in the end of times, at the end of the end times, right? And then, so if you look at Matthew chapter 24, drop down to verse 23. Okay? And Jesus says, at that time, if anyone says to you, look, here is the Messiah, there he is, do not believe it. For false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, who? You. I mean, if you're a Christian. Right? So here's the thing. We read these ancient stories about these monsters and everything else, and like, who wouldn't recognize a monster? Right? It's not like Godzilla comes out of the sea and we're thinking, that's an awesome person. We would run, right? And so we paint these pictures. We see these things differently than the ancients did. They saw them as symbols. They weren't standing by the sea waiting for the coming of the beast. They weren't literalists. They weren't reading this like, better stay away from the sea. We're in Babylon. We're a little safer because we're far from that watery place where everybody's going to die, you know? Or let's go up to the mountains. Let's try and get away from the sea. No, they saw it as symbolic, right? Our trouble is sometimes we look at these things and think, what the heck is this? That's where I was when I first started reading Revelation. I'm like, yeah, grasshoppers with helicopter wings and eyes, like tons of eyes on these beings, and like this just seems ludicrous to me, right? Because I couldn't see they were symbolic, and I certainly couldn't understand the symbolism. I mean, 40 years later, I still struggle with the symbolism, right? But knowing that it's symbolism makes it a lot easier. I know I've got to look for something. Now, what do you look for in this fourth beast? If it happens to arise in our lifetime, what would be the things you would look for based upon what the Scripture says? What? Yeah, he can perform miracles. He does great and mighty things. He is boastful and arrogant, right? So you could look for a boastful person. Someone super boastful and say, yeah, it's a candidate. Doesn't mean that it is that person, but it's somebody that's boastful, right? And it is somebody that's a winner, not a loser. It's not like everybody hates this guy. They're going to like him until he turns on humanity. He isn't going to suddenly come out of nowhere and condemn all Christians everywhere. It's the largest religion in the whole earth. He is not going to rise to power by being stupid. He is going to try and deceive you, right? And the best way to deceive you is say, okay, I'm going to tattoo a 666 on your forehead. And we'll go, great idea, right? He is going to try and fool us. So what we need to be ready for is the fact of the matter that some Antichrist is going to come up, and he's going to be boastful, he's going to be successful, and we may like a lot of the things he says in the beginning because he's a winner. That's what we be looking for. Now, that doesn't mean that person will be around in your lifetime, but that's the clues we have that we know. That's what we know. We don't know the color of his hair. We don't know what nationality he is. We don't know where he comes from. We just know he's going to probably be a Gentile, and we need to watch for it, right? And teach our children to watch. The next generation needs to watch. So that's what we have to do. Now, here's the coolest of the cool part of this chapter for me. All right? Let me look here. So verse 13, Daniel. Go back to chapter 7 of Daniel. Verse 13. In my vision at night I looked, and there before me was one like the Son of Man coming with the clouds of heaven. And he approached the Ancient of Days, and which led into his presence, and he was given authority and glory and sovereign power. And his kingdom will have no end, all that kind of stuff, right? So you have the Ancient of Days coming on the clouds to this long, white-bearded, fiery being, right? Now, those are symbols, too. Doesn't necessarily mean that there's a real fiery river flowing out. Maybe, but they're probably symbols of his power, his authority, his greatness, his white. He's got this long beard. He's wise. All these symbols of ancient times, right? So the Ancient of Days would just be like more ancient than all of us, right? Forever and ever. He's never created Ancient of Days. And the Son of Man comes on the clouds, right? And so here's the Jewish perspective. At the time Jesus was around, there was a theology being regularly taught about the two Yahwehs. All right? So remember, the Lord your God is one. And the Jews had that there was one God, and yet here they are teaching there's two Yahwehs. This is part of the reason why. Because there's definitely two beings here, and they're both godlike. It isn't like the Ancient of Days as God, and this peon comes on the clouds of heaven and is given authority and is worshipped. If he's worshipped, he has to be God. So they're like saying, there's two Yahwehs here, and the other one is the Messiah. That's what they're looking at. All right, now, go to Matthew chapter 26. Again, remember, this is Jesus' apocalypse of end time teaching his disciples, right? And this is what, actually 26, this is 2 chapters later. He actually says something like this in 24 as well in his apocalypse. But 2 chapters later, he's standing before the high priest after he's arrested and taken off his prisoners. So he's already been betrayed, arrested, and his disciples have fled him, and he's alone. He's standing before the high priest and the Sanhedrin, or the court to judge him from the Sanhedrin. And in verse 62, so drop all the way down to verse 62. All right? Because they're charging him with all kinds of charges that two people can't make the same charge. And biblically, you have to have at least 2 witnesses to confirm to be guilty of anything. All right? And they can't get 2 witnesses that can corroborate their stories. And 2 people came up and said, he's going to destroy the temple in 3 days, and like, is there anything illegal about saying that? Probably not. They're struggling. And so the high priest, out of frustration, stands up, and in 62 he says this, the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, are you not going to answer? What is this testimony that these men are bringing against you? But Jesus remained silent. The high priest said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God. Tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. So he's demanding him to tell him, right? That's it. Not because he wants to know. What does he want? Does he want him to say, I am? Why does he want him to say, I am? Yeah, because so incriminate yourself, because they're not going to believe it. So like, if you are the Messiah, doesn't matter because we don't believe it. We just want you to say it so we can say you're blaspheming, right? Well, so Jesus doesn't just come out and say, yes, I'm the Messiah. He says something really interesting here. Look at this. Verse 64, you have said so. And then Mark actually says, I am. But anyway, we're going to go on and say, Jesus replied, but I say to all of you, from now on you will see the Son of Man, the who? Sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, coming on the clouds of heaven. The high priest did not miss that. He knew the book of Daniel. And what's interesting is that the Sadducees, which the high priest was a Sadducee, didn't believe any scripture except for the first 5 books of the Bible. But they still knew the prophecies. The Pharisees are the one that really believed all of it. The prophecies, the Psalms, the first 5 books that Moses wrote, all of that. But he sits here and he says, you will see him coming on the clouds, the Son of Man. Now, Jesus called himself the Son of Man throughout his ministry. The Son of Man will do this. The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath. Oh, all this stuff, right? I remember being a young Christian reading this thinking, why does he call himself the Son of Man? I guess he's like God and man. Maybe that's it. The Son of God. He's also the Son of Man. He's both. There's a little bit of truth to that, but that's not what really he's doing. He's actually going back to one of the most clear prophecies of the Messiah being God, whose dominion will have no end, all right, who's going to come on the clouds. So Jesus is identifying with the Son of Man who comes on the clouds and approaches the Ancient of Days. That's what's going on here. So, you have said so, but I say to you, from now on you will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One, that's the Ancient of Days, coming on the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest tore his clothes, and he has spoken in blasphemy. because they understood that when Jesus said he was the Son of Man coming on the clouds, he was saying he is the Messiah, right? And so why do we need any more witnesses? Now, look, you've heard the blasphemy. What do you think? He's worthy to death, what they wanted, right? And then they put him to death. The whole of the Bible is moving towards a conclusion. It's a story from creation, the messing up of creation. We are the beasts that come up out of the sea. Even in the Babylonian history of when Tiamat is destroyed by her children, out of her body forms humanity. Out of the sea. We are the sea. We are the evil creatures will come out of us. We are the ones that work against God's plan, right? And God's plan was to redeem humanity. This whole complex story, which we can hardly wrap all our minds around, is to redeem us so that we don't wind up destroyed and demolished forever. And his plan is, no, none of us would say we're going to fix the whole world by crucifying somebody. Even though that crucifixion's invented by man, it wasn't designed as the means to save humanity. It was designed to torture those that were the enemy of the Roman Republic, whether they're criminals or actually enemies of the state itself. So why God chooses something like that is that we couldn't predict that. His plans are so complex. It leaves us with a choice, though. It's like, and it should be an obvious choice. Be a part of the monsters that come out of the sea, or follow the one who is crucified in God's plan. And you cannot do both. It's one or the other. And Jesus lays the choice before us, like, make your choice. And unfortunately, Jesus says, few are those that will make that choice. A narrow road, small door, few will find it. Those who have found it constantly say, the path is this way, the path is this way, the little tiny door is that way. And everybody else is going the opposite direction. And you will look like an idiot because you always want to do something different than everybody else. But the reality is we're supposed to be different. It's a narrow path. There's not many people that will fit on it. It's a little door. There's not many people going to even see it. And it's going to look ridiculous. But you have a choice that's laid out. You are the lucky ones. Whether you've chosen to follow Jesus Christ or not, you are the lucky ones who have been told it's laid out clearly for you to make your choice, because apocalypse is coming. Whether it's coming in your lifetime or not, I don't know. It's like, how many of you guys have heard the statement, it has to be coming soon, things can't get much worse? That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. I can lie. You really think we're being fed to lions like in Roman times? Like when the Chinese government took over, the communists took over China and Stalin took over Russia, they murdered millions of Christians. Millions, just because they were Christians. And some people that weren't Christians, they were just accused of being Christians. So don't think that it's coming soon because things are so horrible. Now, in some parts of the world, it really is. They have every reason to think the time is coming soon. We, not so much. We might be really susceptible of finding this amazing being that's going to make the world wonderful. We have to be careful. We have to be careful. I say this and I'll say it again. It's very anti-American, but I am a monarchist. Jesus is my king. Right? He is my king, he's my king, he's my king. And I am not going to deviate from that. Jesus is never going to turn over his kingdom to democracy. Democracy is not as good as a kingdom when your king is him. But that's what you have to choose. You have to choose that Jesus Christ is your king. Now, most of today, this is way more information than I usually give you. You can blame Daniel, all right? So let's pray. Father in heaven, thank you so much for your word. Even though we have such a difficult time understanding that you've given us everything we need to know at this time. I pray, Lord, that your Spirit would give us the ability to interpret the times that we live, and that we would not be fooled, whether it's by the Antichrist or people who act like the Antichrist or any person that chooses to deceive, that we would trust in you, that we would learn your word, and we would want to be able to discern the times so that we would not be deceived. I pray for the many in this room, Lord, that we would all be fully devoted and committed to you, that we would follow you with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength to the end of time and beyond. You deserve all power, glory, and honor. Your kingdom will have no end. And I am grateful that the kingdoms of the world are not good. Forgive us for giving allegiances maybe that are undeserved to things of this world, and help us focus our allegiance on you. That our allegiance will be following you. We ask all these things in Jesus' name.